Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Movies and More with Bill Ben Barker. I am Bill Ben Barker, and I'm so glad you could join me. We're going to be doing a couple things today. We're going to be talking a little bit about film noir and what it means, at least to me. And also then I want to talk about a film that is often considered to be one of the, legendary film noir, Laura, directed by Otto Preminger. So if you'll bear with me a little bit, I'm going to start by just talking about how I came up with this idea to begin with. I have recently been working with a group of my actor friends in the presentation of a murder mystery dinner theater production. And as always, it's a great joy to be doing that. I've done it for many, many years, and I've made some great friends doing it, and I really enjoy doing it. And we did it. It was really the first live show that we've done in 2 years. We've done some virtual murder mystery productions, and they've been fun. But this was live in front of a real audience, and I've got to tell you, the audience was very receptive. I mean, we had our own restrictions that we put on it because, as far as I'm concerned, we're not totally out of the pandemic woods yet. But it worked out. It worked out very well. But at one point, what I'm getting around to, at one point in my script, one of the less than honorable characters in the story attempts to lure a vulnerable woman into his evil grasp. And what I had him do, what I put in the script was, at this point, this evil character, Henry, sings a parody of the song Laura. Sissy is the face in the misty lights. I don't know if you can recognize that melody. Anyway, that was it. But as we rehearsed this scene, it became clear to me that most of my cast had no idea about that song. So eventually I ditched that idea and instead used the theme from The Outer Limits for the character to seduce the woman into the evil arms of Henry. But I was totally surprised that Laura had come to such a lack of identity. I've loved that song for as long as I can remember. The Mercer lyrics, and of course the song was written, the music was written by David Raxon, and the lyrics actually written later, after the production of the movie, after the release of the movie. The lyrics were added by Johnny Mercer. But, the song has got a haunting melody, and of course the lyrics are, very enticing as well. I became aware of this song and this film as a teenager, but I guess I related to this song as maybe a potential first love. And even now, as an aging boomer, the song represents a promise of possibilities, even though, quote, she's only a dream, especially for this aging boomer. Anyway, the more I thought about it, the more consumed I became. I was humming the song for days. I was butchering the lyrics. And then last week, the 1944 film, Laura, ran on Turner Classic Movies. And of course, as I mentioned, I'd seen it many times. But now it was so riveted in my head, I decided I needed to watch it once again. In the intro, and I love Turner Classic Movies, and they have some great hosts on the network who give very informative and engaging introductions and, afterwards to the film, some of the films. And Ben Mankiewicz, I guess, is the head host there. And he said that he thought that Laura was perhaps the greatest film noir of all time. And I kind of wrinkled my brow at that. Film noir, Laura. I was surprised. And of course, I admit that I've had a very limited understanding of film noir. But I thought it required always very dark images on back city streets occupied exclusively by unredeemable characters. That was what I thought of film noir. And so I decided to look into the genre a little bit more. Beyond the initial definition is a debate among film scholars as to whether, first of all, is noir a genre or is it a style? I'm not sure, to me at least, there's a whole lot of difference. But what does seem clear to me is that films that fall into this category almost always have something to do with the themes found in the story, the themes that are supported by a general atmosphere that the filmmakers have created. Film noir is always about the fall of a character who deteriorates through various situational encounters, and that decline is often attributed to self-obsession or to the obsession of others. The character who falls is the victim of manipulation and has little or no control. In the end, the character suffers irreversible consequences. And here are some of the common noir traits that I came up with. The protagonist is often characterized as a detective, but may also be portrayed as a boxer, a convict, a screenwriter, a hitman, or absolutely any other ne'er-do-well who falls into that kind of unfortunate situation. A femme fatale is a female character who seduces or lures men into compromising, dangerous, and sometimes deadly situations. And, we've all heard that term before, femme fatale. Maybe we weren't exactly sure what it meant. The setting and the circumstances are important because a noir theme may reflect the cultural landscape of the time during which the film was made. A noir film is certain to possess plot twists and turns. Unusual camera angles are often present, and also shadings of light and dark become very important. Music often becomes its own character in a film noir, and that's kind of what got me into this study to begin with. Oh yes, dark images, plenty of bad guys, often present during the noir heyday of the 40s and the 50s. But now, as I've studied this a little bit, I see that there's a lot more to it, and I like it. So let's take a look at Laura, a film made in 1944. It was based on a novel by the same name by Vera Caspary, with a screenplay by Jay Dratler, Samuel Hoffenstein, and Betty Reinhardt. And it was directed by the great Austro-Hungarian director Otto Preminger. Maybe somewhat underrated in this country, but his films are great. We are told with the first line of the film that Laura is dead. The character Laura is dead. Shortly thereafter, we meet a detective charged with finding her murderer. So we surmise we are in for a good old-fashioned whodunit, right? But it becomes clear that whodunit is inconsequential. In fact, we soon find there to be a cavalcade of viable suspects. But as we move along through the film, it really doesn't matter who the murderer is. There are other things. Any one of these suspects could easily be the murderer, but the real enticement of the story is the multi-dimensional passions emanated toward the dead Laura by everybody. New York City Police Department Detective Mark McPherson discovers an array of strange relationships surrounding the victim. Waldo Lydecker, a New York newspaper columnist who is at first quite rude to Laura, is suddenly drawn to her. He becomes her mentor and her confidant, but he seeks more. Shelby Carpenter, a handsome down-home hick, somehow becomes Laura's fiancée. Although he may not have regarded her as his best meal ticket, still he is allured by Laura's beauty and wit. Anne Treadwell is Laura's well-to-do aunt who is keeping, and you do know what I mean by keeping, Carpenter, for physical intentions. Beneath her placid exterior rages a jealous design toward her niece. She loves that boy. At least she lusts after him. And finally, there is McPherson himself, the detective. Yes, as he investigates the crime scene, Laura's apartment, he seems to venture well beyond the normal fingerprint-like assessments. He reads her love letters. He smells her perfume. I don't know what else he smells. And throughout, he is devoured by the giant portrait of Laura hanging on the wall. It's quite an image that Preminger creates with the portrait of Laura kind of overseeing this whole thing. About midway through the film, there is a twist that significantly alters the course of McPherson's investigation in his life. I'm not going to say right now what it is in case you haven't seen it, and you might want to see it, and I don't want to ruin it for you. Okay? But I'll just say it's a twist that kind of changes everything. As the audience, we are captivated not so much by the who, where, what, and why, but by the consuming journey that gets us there. At least that's how I see it. At the root of all this is Preminger's direction. Most of the scenes present somewhat talky dialogue as the detective questions each of the suspects. But these are well-paced, and anyone who's ever worked with me in a theater production know how important I think pacing is. Paint a motif of privilege and desire. Again, that goes against maybe what is the common thought of what noir should be, but it certainly is here, and it's what works. The camera is slow, steady, and always interesting. The David Raksin score, as I said, this is what started me on this quest, is almost hypnotic. It is used often and effectively. And ironically, in studying the film, I learned, as I mentioned before, this enchanting lyric that Johnny Mercer provides and has, been in the back of my head for, 70 years or close to it, were added after the film had been released. I'm not sure how long after, but significantly after the late release of the film. And of course, there have been many, many versions, covers of that song. Frank Sinatra, of course, may be the best known, the Frank Sinatra's version of Laura. But the eternal appeal of the film, I believe, is most reliant on the staunch credibility of the cast. Very fine acting we find here. Clifton Webb is cantankerous and wily as newspaper columnist Waldo Lydecker. His character weaves its apprehensive way in and out of our suspicions. His voice is riveting and appealing. And later on, he would become Mr. Belvedere in the movies. He made a whole slew of Mr. Belvedere. That was a franchise, right? Mr. Belvedere. And then years later, it became a television program as well. It's been used a lot. Vincent Price, yes, Vincent Price, that Vincent Price is quite believable as the bumbling romantic lead. Price is focused and deliberate in pursuing the gold-digging elements of his character. We of later generations may have a difficult time accepting him here because of our knowledge of his later career, which, of course, was in horror. And he was the master of horror. House on Haunted Hill, I can't even start. But in this early time, he was a romantic lead, a romantic lead with a female fiancée, which is kind of amazing. But I gotta say, he does a great job in this character. He does a great job. Dana Andrews is the rugged epitome of the gumshoe detective. His performance is guardedly understated, yet strong. But we feel his fall as he gazes into the eyes of Laura's portrait. Andrews projects a vivid vulnerability as his flawed character evolves. And Judith Anderson's stoic demeanor is harrowing. It beckons appropriate dislike for Auntie Anne. And she is kind of evil. You feel like you want to hiss at her a little bit there. Yes, this is definitely a noir of passion, but the object of all this attention is perhaps the mightiest obsession of all, Laura herself. We really don't find out much about Laura as a person, but to the characters in the film, she is an ideal. The perfect woman, beautiful, smart, and alluring. In the role, Jean Tierney, is the perfect femme fatale. She effortlessly weaves her spell over all concerned, and over us too, at least over me. I had a chance, and she was beautiful, just a beautiful woman. I recently, as I was getting into all this, I went on the YouTube and just kind of did some searches, and I found do you remember Mike Douglas? Mike Douglas was a guy who had a talk show on television, I guess back in the 60s and 70s. And he had Gene Tierney on as a guest later in her life. And she was very personable. Even I'm guessing she was probably in her late 70s, early 80s at that time. I'm not sure exactly how old she was, but she, let's put it this way, she didn't look like on Mike Douglas like she looked like in Laura. But she was very personable, and it was interesting to hear her talk about her film career. If you've never seen Laura, ladies and gentlemen, I recommend you take a look. No car chases, no monsters, no superheroes, just the human condition. And you know how frightening that can be. Thank you for listening to our podcast. And we hope we'll see you again next time on Movies and More with Bill Ben Barker.